What if the life you've always known was a lie? A fragile illusion hiding a truth so dangerous it could unravel everything you hold dear. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a mystery, where every choice could lead to salvation or destruction. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Samuel Harper's garage, casting golden rays across a space cluttered with the relics of a lifetime spent fixing machines. At 67, the retired military engineer had settled into a quiet life in a quaint seaside village, where his knack for breathing life into forgotten vehicles had made him a local legend. Samuel wiped the sweat from his weathered brow, his gaze settling on his latest project, a battered M35 military truck he'd snagged at a government auction for a steal. Its olive green paint had faded into a patchwork of rust and grime, but beneath the decay, Samuel could sense its strength, a whisper of history that tugged at his soul in a way he couldn't explain. "What secrets are you hiding, old friend?" he murmured, his rough fingers tracing the dented hood. The truck's military markings had been meticulously stripped, leaving only ghostly outlines where insignias once stood proud. The serial numbers on the chassis were ground down, not enough to raise alarm, but enough to make Samuel, with his years of experience, pause. This wasn't standard procedure for a decommissioned vehicle. Something about this truck felt personal. Now, imagine you're Samuel, standing before a relic that seems to whisper secrets from a past you don't remember. What would you do next? Would you dig deeper into the truck's mysteries, risking everything to uncover the truth? Or would you walk away, choosing the safety of ignorance over the danger of knowledge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Write option 1 if you'd seek the truth, or option 2 if you'd let it go. And while you're there, hit that like button and subscribe to daily narrated stories for more gripping tales that pull you into the heart of the unknown. Let's dive into Samuel's journey, a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew. Samuel popped the hood, the creak of rusted hinges echoing in the quiet garage like a sigh from the past. Beneath layers of dust and neglect, the engine gleamed with an unexpected vitality, as if someone had gone to great lengths to make it look abandoned while preserving its core. It was a contradiction that sent a shiver down Samuel's spine, a whisper of deceit that made his heart beat a little faster. He grabbed his toolbox, the familiar weight grounding him as he began the painstaking work of restoration. Each turn of the wrench, each wiped-away smear of grease, brought a comforting rhythm, a dance he'd perfected over decades. The scent of oil and metal filled the air, a nostalgic perfume that usually calmed his nerves. But today something felt off. When he finally climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the cracked steering wheel, the air around him seemed to shift, growing heavy with an unspoken promise. A sudden, jarring vision tore through his mind, the deafening chop of helicopter blades, frantic voices shouting in a tongue he couldn't understand, a blinding flash of light, then an abyss of darkness. Samuel gasped, his chest tightening as his pulse thundered in his ears. His hands gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles turned white, the leather creaking under his fingers. "What in the world was that?" he whispered, his voice trembling as he shook his head to dispel the haunting images. His neighbor, Thomas, strolled by the open garage door, his whistle cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's a beast of a machine, Samuel. You'll need a miracle to get that thing running again," Thomas called out with a grin, his voice warm with the familiarity of their small-town friendship. Samuel forced a tight smile, his mind still reeling from the vision he couldn't explain. "I've never met a truck I couldn't fix, Thomas," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt, though his hand still shook slightly as he waved Thomas off. But as Thomas disappeared down the street, Samuel's thoughts spiraled. The vision had felt so real, too real to be a trick of the mind. It was as if the truck itself had reached into his soul, pulling out a fragment of a life he didn't remember living. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows crept into the garage, Samuel found himself drawn back to the truck. It sat there like a silent sentinel, its presence almost magnetic, as if it were calling to him in a language only he could hear. He grabbed a flashlight, the beam dancing across the vehicle's frame as he examined every inch with a meticulous eye. The craftsmanship was undeniable: a reinforced undercarriage, custom engine mounts, an oddly configured cargo area. This wasn't just a transport truck. It had been built for a purpose, something specific and secretive. As he slid beneath the chassis, the cold metal pressing against his back, Samuel's light caught on something unusual, a faint, unnatural seam in the frame. His breath caught in his throat, a mix of curiosity and dread pooling in his chest. The seam was nearly invisible, a hidden compartment welded with precision that only someone with Samuel's expertise would notice. His curiosity surged, a heady mix of excitement and fear knotting in his stomach. "What are you hiding from me?" he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper as he reached for a screwdriver. His hands, steady from years of mechanical work, trembled slightly as he pried open the compartment, the metal scraping against metal with a sound that set his teeth on edge. Inside was a small, military-grade tin, its edges sealed tight against time and the elements. Samuel's heart raced as he carried it to his workbench, the tin's weight heavy with promise. With a soft click, it opened, revealing a tarnished silver coin nestled in a bed of faded velvet. He frowned, holding it under the dim glow of his desk lamp, the light casting long shadows across his weathered hands. The coin was unlike any he'd seen. Thick, heavy, its edges worn smooth as if it had been carried as a talisman rather than spent. Turning it over, he saw the engraving, 1986 Enigma Ops. The words hit him like a jolt, a dull ache pulsing behind his temple as they stirred something deep within him. "Enigma Ops," he whispered, the phrase feeling both foreign and achingly familiar, like a song he'd forgotten the lyrics to. He sat there for a long moment, the coin heavy in his palm, his mind racing with questions he didn't know how to answer. The moment of quiet reflection shattered as headlights sliced through the garage, bathing the walls in a harsh glare. Samuel quickly pocketed the coin, his instincts screaming caution as he stepped to the entrance, the cool night air brushing against his skin. A black SUV with tinted windows sat in his driveway, its engine idling ominously, the low hum vibrating through the ground. The driver's door opened, and a man in a sharp suit emerged, his every movement precise, his posture rigid with military discipline. His eyes, cold and calculating, missed nothing as he approached, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "Mr. Harper," the man said, his voice deep and measured, not a question but a statement that sent a chill down Samuel's spine. Samuel nodded cautiously, his throat dry, the coin in his pocket feeling like a lead weight. "That's me," he managed, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. The man's gaze flicked past him to the truck, his expression unreadable, though there was a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, in his eyes. "I understand you recently purchased a decommissioned military vehicle," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "That's right," Samuel replied, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Nothing illegal about it. Bought it fair and square at the Marshall County auction." The man's eyes lingered on the truck, his silence stretching out like a taut wire. "Have you found anything unusual while working on it?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. But there was an edge to it, a hidden threat that made Samuel's stomach twist. Samuel's hand instinctively moved toward the pocket where the coin rested, then froze. Something in his gut told him to be careful, to tread lightly. "Just rust and grime," he said, his tone casual, though his heart pounded in his chest. "Pretty standard for these old beasts." The man studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment, his silence more unnerving than words, his gaze piercing as if he could see right through Samuel's facade. "If you do find anything, documentation, equipment, anything out of place, we'd appreciate a call," he said finally, handing Samuel a plain white business card with only a phone number embossed on it. No name, no agency. Samuel took the card, his fingers brushing against the man's gloved hand, the contact sending a shiver through him. "Who exactly would I be calling?" he asked, his unease growing with every passing second. "The rightful owners," the man replied cryptically, his lips twitching into a faint, humorless smile before he turned back to his vehicle. Samuel watched the SUV disappear into the night, a cold knot forming in his stomach, the card in his hand feeling like a ticking time bomb. He returned to his workbench, his mind racing as he fired up his ancient laptop, the screen flickering to life with a faint hum. Typing Enigma Ops 1986 into the search bar, he held his breath, but the results were a letdown. Nothing but video game references and fictional military tales. He tried different combinations: classified mission, special ops, black operation, but found nothing, his frustration mounting with each dead end. It was as if Enigma Ops had been erased from existence, scrubbed from history by an unseen hand. Slamming the laptop shut, he ran a hand through his graying hair, his thoughts a tangled mess. His phone buzzed on the workbench, the sound jolting him out of his reverie. A text from an unknown number. "If you remember anything, tell no one. We're coming for you." Samuel's blood ran cold, his forehead beating with sweat as he stared at the message, the words searing into his mind. Remember what? He turned back to the truck, his flashlight sweeping over its frame with renewed intensity, the beam trembling in his unsteady hand. That's when he noticed them. Tiny puncture marks, evenly spaced along the metal, carefully repaired and painted over. Bullet holes. This truck had seen combat, and someone had gone to great lengths to hide it, to bury its past beneath layers of paint and time. As Samuel traced the repaired damage, his fingers brushing against the cold metal, another vision struck him like a lightning bolt. Sand stinging his face, the acrid smell of gunpowder burning his nostrils, men in unmarked uniforms shouting as explosions shook the earth. His younger hands, steady and sure, worked frantically on an engine amidst the chaos, the heat of the desert sun scorching his skin. Samuel stumbled back, gasping for air, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. These weren't hallucinations. They felt like memories, vivid and raw, as if he were reliving them in real time. But that was impossible. He'd spent his military career stateside, designing engine systems at a base in Georgia, never seeing combat. Or had he? Doubt crept in, a creeping fog that blurred the edges of his reality, making him question everything he thought he knew. The truck seemed to loom over him, a silent witness to a past he couldn't grasp, its presence both a comfort and a threat. Something was terribly wrong, and Samuel knew time was slipping away, each second ticking by like a countdown to an inevitable reckoning. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, he made a decision, his resolve hardening like steel. Whatever this truck was, whatever connection it had to these fractured memories, it was dangerous, too dangerous to keep. He had to get rid of it before whoever sent that text came knocking. He loaded the cab with essentials, tools, a water bottle, his phone, and turned the key, his hands steady despite the storm in his mind. The engine roared to life with an eerie ease, as if it had been waiting for him all along, eager to fulfill its purpose. Samuel pulled out of his driveway, heading for the industrial district where an old friend, Marcus, ran a scrapyard. No questions asked, cash only. The truck would be dismantled and untraceable within hours, its secrets buried in a pile of scrap metal. The streets were quiet in the early morning, the town still asleep, the only sound the hum of the truck's engine and the distant cry of seagulls. But in his rearview mirror, Samuel spotted a motorcycle gaining on him, its rider moving with purpose, the bike's engine a low growl that sent a spike of fear through him. His heart raced as the rider pulled alongside, tossing something through the open window before speeding off into the dawn. A manila envelope landed on the passenger seat, its weight heavy with foreboding. Samuel swerved into an empty parking lot, his hands shaking as he tore open the envelope, the paper crinkling under his fingers. Inside was a black and white photograph, its edges soft with age, the image faded but unmistakable. It showed a group of men in unmarked tactical gear, standing in front of the same truck he now drove, only newer, untouched by time. In the center stood a younger version of himself, his face, but not his posture, not his eyes. This man was a soldier, a warrior, exuding a confidence Samuel didn't recognize, a steely determination that sent a jolt of recognition through him. On the back, in faded handwriting, were the words, Team Enigma, Helmand Province, 1986. A wave of dizziness crashed over him, memories exploding like fireworks, running through a mountain pass, the weight of a rifle in his hands, secret meetings in windowless rooms, coordinates memorized and then burned, faces of men who trusted him with their lives, their laughter echoing in his ears. Samuel's breath caught in his throat, his hands trembling as he gripped the steering wheel, the photograph slipping from his fingers to the floor of the cab. "That's not me," he whispered, his voice breaking. even as he knew the denial was futile. I was never there. I was at Fort Gordon in '86, designing engines. I never. His words faltered as another memory surfaced. Needles piercing his skin, a sterile hospital room, men in lab coats discussing memory suppression protocols in hushed tones, their voices clinical and detached. The sound of engines snapped him back to the present, a low rumble that grew into a roar. 4 black SUVs roared into the parking lot, forming a perfect blockade around his truck, their tires screeching against the pavement. There was no escape. Men in tactical gear spilled out, weapons drawn but not raised, their movements precise and disciplined, their faces hidden behind dark visors. Among them was the suited man from the day before, now flanked by military personnel in unmarked uniforms, their presence a stark contrast to the quiet morning. Samuel's mind raced. He thought about flooring the gas, breaking through the blockade, but he knew it was pointless. This had been inevitable from the moment he laid eyes on the truck, a collision course set in motion decades ago. The suited man approached, his expression softening with what might have been regret, though his eyes remained sharp, assessing. "Mr. Harper? Or perhaps you're starting to remember that wasn't always your name." "Get out of the vehicle, sir," he said, his tone professional but firm, leaving no room for argument. Samuel stepped down, his legs unsteady, the pavement cold beneath his boots, the parking lot now a sealed perimeter with at least 8 agents surrounding him. This wasn't local law enforcement. These men moved with military precision, their every action calculated and deliberate. "I'm Director Nathaniel Pierce, Special Projects Division," the suited man said, his voice steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. "And you and I need to have a conversation that's 30 years overdue." Samuel held up the photograph, his hand trembling, the paper crinkling in his grip. "You want to explain this? Because according to my memory, I was never there. I was never him," he said, pointing to his younger self in the image, the soldier staring back with a steely resolve Samuel couldn't reconcile with the man he'd become. Pierce studied his face, his gaze piercing, as if he could see the storm of memories raging behind Samuel's eyes. "How much have you remembered?" he asked, his voice low, almost gentle, but there was an undercurrent of urgency that made Samuel's skin prickle. "Fragments," Samuel admitted, his voice raw, the words scraping against his throat. "It doesn't make sense, but enough to know I'm not who I thought I was." Pierce nodded to one of his men, who handed him a tablet, the screen glowing faintly in the morning light. "Mr. Harper, or Master Sergeant Daniel Reed, or any of the other names you've used, what do you remember about Operation Enigma Ops?" Samuel's mouth went dry, his mind a battlefield of conflicting memories, each one vying for dominance. "Nothing, everything," he stammered, struggling to piece it together, his thoughts a tangled mess of sand and blood and betrayal. "There was a mission. Mountains. Something went wrong." Pierce's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the truth Samuel was uncovering. In 1986, the government assembled an elite team for a black operation in Afghanistan. Off the books, deniable, with zero official connection to the United States, Pierce began, his voice steady, each word carefully chosen. The mission was to extract a Soviet scientist who developed a revolutionary propulsion system that could change warfare forever. Samuel stared at the truck, his heart sinking, the weight of Pierce's words pressing down on him like a physical force. "And this vehicle, custom-built to transport the scientist and his research," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together in a way that made his stomach churn. "Your team extracted him successfully," Pierce continued, his tone growing colder, more clinical, "but you were ambushed during extraction. The official record states all team members were killed in action." Samuel's eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and dawning realization washing over him. "But I'm here," he said, his voice trembling with the weight of the implication. "Yes," Pierce replied, gesturing to the truck, his movements sharp and deliberate. "And that's the complication. When we detected this vehicle had been purchased at auction, a clerical error that never should have happened, we had to investigate. Finding you alive was unexpected." Samuel's head throbbed as more memories broke through the fog, each one a shard of glass slicing through the illusion of his life. The mission, the firefight, the betrayal. We were set up, he said suddenly, the realization hitting him like a punch to the gut, his voice rising with a mix of anger and clarity. Someone knew our extraction route. They were waiting for us. Pierce's eyes hardened, though his face remained impassive, a mask of control that didn't quite reach his gaze. That's classified information, Mr. Harper, he said, his voice tight, the words a warning as much as a statement. Read. Samuel corrected automatically, then froze, startled by his own response, the name slipping from his lips like a long-forgotten truth. My name was Daniel Reed. A woman stepped forward from the group, her silver hair catching the morning light, her presence commanding, her eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. She studied Samuel with a keen interest, her gaze softening as she spoke. The memory suppression was never meant to be permanent, she explained, her voice gentle, like a mother soothing a frightened child. Just enough to give you a new life, protection from those who'd want to eliminate loose ends. Samuel's gaze darted between them, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. You're saying you erased my memories to protect me? He asked, the words tasting bitter on his tongue, each one a betrayal he couldn't yet fully grasp. Pierce and the woman exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them before Pierce spoke. Partially, he admitted, his tone reluctant, as if the truth were a weight he didn't want to bear. But also because what you knew, what you saw during that mission, was deemed too sensitive for anyone outside the highest security clearance. Samuel leaned against the truck, the cold metal grounding him as his world tilted, the foundation of his life crumbling beneath him. My whole life, it's been a lie, he said, his voice breaking, the words a raw, open wound. Not a lie, the woman said gently, her voice like a bomb against the storm in his mind. A second chance, a fabricated background, yes, but everything you've accomplished since, your career, your friendships, that's been genuinely you. Samuel's jaw tightened, his voice hardening as the anger bubbled to the surface, a fire igniting in his chest. Why now? Why not let me keep living in ignorance? He demanded, his eyes flashing with a mix of defiance and pain. Pierce gestured to the truck, his movements sharp, his voice cold with urgency. Because this vehicle contains more than just memories, Mr. Reed. The technology your team extracted never made it back to U.S. soil. We believed it was destroyed in the ambush, but recent intelligence suggests components may still be hidden within this truck, dormant but intact. Samuel looked at the vehicle with new eyes, a chill running down his spine as the implications sank in. The truck's presence suddenly ominous, a Pandora's box he'd unwittingly opened. And if it fell into the wrong hands, he began, his voice trailing off as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. It would be catastrophic, the woman finished, her tone grave, her eyes filled with a quiet urgency that mirrored the storm in Samuel's heart. Which is why we need your help. The old you, Daniel Reed, would know exactly where to look. Samuel ran his hand along the truck's frame, the metal feeling like a ghost under his touch, a relic of a life he'd lost. And if I refuse to remember? If I choose to stay Samuel Harper? He asked, his voice low, a challenge laced with fear. Pierce's expression turned grim, his eyes darkening with a resolve that sent a shiver through Samuel. Then we contain the situation by whatever means necessary, he said, his voice cold, the words a thinly veiled threat. You have two choices, sir. Help us voluntarily access what's hidden in this truck, or we'll be forced to extract the information through less pleasant methods. Samuel looked around, at the agents, at the life he'd built slipping away, at the photograph of a man he used to be, the soldier staring back with a resolve he was only beginning to reclaim. How much time do I have to decide? He asked, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. None, Pierce replied, his voice cold, cutting through the morning air like a blade. This isn't just about national security anymore. Other interested parties have detected activity around this technology. They're already moving. As if on cue, the distant sound of helicopters grew louder, a menacing thrum against the morning air, the sound vibrating through the pavement beneath Samuel's feet. That's not ours, the woman said sharply, her voice tinged with alarm as she checked her comms device, her movements quick and precise. Pierce turned to Samuel, his composure cracking, the mask of control slipping to reveal a flicker of fear. Time's up, Reed. "Are you with us or not?" he demanded, his voice urgent. The helicopter's roar growing louder, a relentless pulse that mirrored Samuel's racing heart. Pierce barked orders into his radio, his team moving into defensive positions around the parking lot, their movements swift and coordinated, a well-oiled machine preparing for battle. Samuel stood frozen, caught between two lives, the comfortable illusion of Samuel Harper and the dangerous truth of Daniel Reed. The coin in his pocket seemed to burn against his thigh, a tangible reminder of the past he couldn't escape, its weight a constant reminder of the truth he was only beginning to uncover. "Those helicopters," Samuel said, a new memory clicking into place, the pieces of the puzzle falling together with a clarity that stole his breath, black with red striping on the tail, no visible identification. Pierce's head snapped toward him, his eyes narrowing, a mix of suspicion and alarm flashing across his face. "How do you know that?" "They're not in visual range yet," he said, his voice sharp, the question a demand. "Because they're the same ones from the ambush," Samuel replied, his voice low and steady, the pieces falling into place with a chilling finality. "Whoever set us up 30 years ago just found us again." The woman's expression shifted to alarm, her composure faltering for the first time, her eyes widening with a fear she couldn't hide. "That's impossible," she said, her voice trembling slightly, the words a desperate denial. "The only people who knew about the operation outside our team were inside our own government." Samuel finished the thought, his voice cold with realization, the truth settling over him like a shroud. "We weren't extracted because of a mission gone wrong," he said, each word a hammer striking steel. "We were abandoned because we saw something we weren't supposed to see." Pierce's face remained stoic, but his eyes flickered with something, recognition, or perhaps fear, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. "Whatever you think you know," he began, his voice tight. But Samuel cut him off, the memories flooding back in a torrent, a dam breaking inside him. "I know the scientist wasn't Soviet," he said, his voice rising, the words spilling out like a confession. "I know the technology wasn't just propulsion, and I know why this truck is so important." He placed his hand on the hood, the metal vibrating faintly under his touch, a faint hum that seemed to resonate with the memories flooding his mind. "It's not what's in the truck that matters, it's what the truck itself is." The first helicopter appeared on the horizon, followed by two more, their ominous shapes growing larger, the red striping on their tails stark against the black metal, just as Samuel had described. Pierce's team scrambled, unpacking heavier weapons as the threat loomed closer, the air thick with tension, the morning light casting long shadows across the parking lot. "Reed, we don't have time for this," Pierce snapped, his voice sharp, his composure fraying at the edges. "You need to tell us where the components are hidden." Samuel laughed bitterly, the sound hollow against the roar of the helicopters, a mix of defiance and despair. "You still don't get it," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The components aren't hidden in the truck." He knocked against the frame, the metal ringing with an unnatural resonance, a sound that seemed to echo with the weight of the truth. "The entire truck is the component. The metal itself, it's the technology." Pierce went pale, his voice a whisper, the color draining from his face as the implications sank in. "That's classified beyond your clearance, even back then," he said, his voice trembling, the words a confession he hadn't meant to make. "Yet I knew," Samuel said quietly, his eyes burning with the weight of betrayal, the fire of his past reigniting in his chest. "Which is why my team never made it home, except me." He looked up at the approaching helicopters, their roar deafening now, the wind from their blades whipping through the parking lot, then back to Pierce, his voice steady despite the chaos, a resolve settling over him like armor. "You have two options now," he said, his words clear and firm, each one a challenge. "Tell me the truth about what happened to my men, or I walk away and let whatever's coming deal with you." The woman stepped forward, her voice pleading, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Daniel, please, whatever you think happened," she began, but Samuel cut her off, his voice firm, a declaration of the man he'd chosen to be. "My name," he said, his tone unyielding, "is Samuel Harper. That's who I chose to be. But I remember everything now." He reached into the truck, retrieving a hidden key from beneath the seat. A key Pierce recognized instantly, his eyes widening in shock, a gasp escaping his lips. "You have the activation key," Pierce breathed, his voice trembling, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Insurance policy," Samuel replied, his tone cold, the words a promise as much as a threat. "Now, about those options." The helicopters were close enough now that their markings were visible, exactly as Samuel had described, the red striping a stark contrast against the black metal, a haunting echo of the past. Pierce glanced at the approaching threat, then back to Samuel, his expression torn, the weight of the decision etched into every line of his face. "You don't understand what's at stake," he said, his voice a desperate plea, but Samuel's resolve was unshakable. "I understand everything," he countered, his voice unwavering, the truth a weapon in his hands. "That's been the problem all along." He held up the key, watching as both Pierce's team and the helicopter zeroed in on the small metal object in his hand. A key that could unlock technology capable of reshaping the balance of global power. A key that held the weight of his past and the future of the world. "So," Samuel said, his voice calm despite the chaos. The roar of the helicopters deafening above, the wind whipping through the parking lot like a tempest. "Shall we start again? With the truth this time? What if you discovered your entire life was a fabrication, a mask to hide a dangerous truth that could change the world? Would you fight to uncover the real you, even if it meant losing everything you've built, every memory you've cherished, every moment of peace you've carved out for yourself? Or would you cling to the comfort of the lie, hoping the past stays buried, even as it threatens to rise again?" Samuel's journey is a testament to the courage it takes to face the unknown, to reclaim a stolen identity, and to stand firm in the face of betrayal. It's a story of resilience, of hope rising from the ashes of a shattered past, of a man who chose to embrace the truth, no matter the cost. His story reminds us that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that set us free, that even in the darkest shadows, there is light to be found, a light that can guide us home. Take a moment to reflect. What would you do in Samuel's place? Would you search for the truth, no matter the cost, risking everything for the chance to know who you really are? Or would you choose the safety of ignorance, preserving the life you've built at the expense of the truth? Drop truth or forget in the comments below and share your own stories of uncovering hidden truths in your life. Let's start a conversation about the power of facing our past, about the strength it takes to reclaim what's been taken from us. The clock is ticking, and Samuel's story is far from over. Will he unlock the truck's secrets, revealing a technology that could change the world? Or will the past consume him, dragging him back into the shadows he escaped? Don't miss the explosive continuation of this gripping tale. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories right now to catch the next chapter and dive into more life-changing mysteries that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Time's running out. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers today. At Daily Narrated Stories, we're dedicated to bringing you impactful tales that inspire, uplift, and ignite your imagination. Stories that remind us of the power of hope, the strength of resilience, and the courage it takes to face the unknown. Don't wait. Be part of the journey now. What do you think they were hiding? Drop your guess in the comments below, and let's unravel the mystery together.